Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the most recent updates to the Shadow Priest tier set in 10.1. So as of yesterday, Blizzard made an announcement that we already knew that they were iterating on all the tier sets, and yesterday they announced that they had some new versions for people to look at. Also, I'll mention that these are on the PTR, so if you do want to go out and test, then you can. I haven't had a chance to play with the tier set on PTR yet. I haven't had very much PTR time. I think I did like one weekend of keys, and that's been it so far. I was planning to do a lot more, but unfortunately, real life has gotten in the way. So anyway, I thought I'd do a quick recap of the old tier set bonus, and then show you guys the new tier set bonus, and talk about the changes, whether I think it's better or worse. So the old tier set bonus, the 2-set bonus, when consuming Shadowy Insight, Mind Blast deals 60% increased damage and generates 4 additional insanity. And then the 4-set bonus, every 400 insanity spent summons Shadow Fiend or Mindbender for 5 seconds, depending on which one you're talented into. So a lot of people weren't sure what this meant. Does this mean that if you already have Mindbender out and that you proc this, does it extend it for 5 seconds? Do you get 2 Mindbenders? That was the big question. And then also, if you could generate and spend enough insanity quickly enough, could you have, like, if you proc this once and then in this 5-second window procced it again, which is impossible, by the way. There was some pretty significant testing of this on the PTR by the Shadow team, and they could never generate this much insanity that quickly. But if you could, for some reason, then could you have 3 Mindbenders at a time, potentially? And the answer to that was, first, that it's impossible. Second, that, yeah, you probably could. If you could somehow make that much insanity, the way this worked was that it didn't extend your current Shadow Fiend or Mindbender. It gave you a second one. So that's how it was before. There were some cool little interactions with that. Blizzard has done this a couple times, made stuff proc when you spend a certain amount of resource. Not for Shadow specifically, but like Balance of All Things, or what's the Arcanic Pulsar, I think is, I don't remember what it's called. There's a Balance Druid legendary that they used to play, and that would give them, after 300 Astral Power, would give them stuff. Anyway, so that's something that Blizzard likes to do. I think it's an okay play style. It's not too bad to play around. Okay, I've been, doing my insanity thing. Oh, I'm going to have this sweet buff moment. I want to plan that at a perfect time. I think that's an okay way to play. Although Shadow Fiend and Mindbender are very, very weak on their own, and I'm not a huge fan of things that, buff Shadow Fiend and Mindbender, or give you more Shadow Fiends or Mindbenders, just because they aren't super strong. They do increase your insanity gen a little bit, and with enough of this, I saw some people who did test this a decent amount, and Inescapable Torment, the Shadow Fiend Mindbender thing, was doing a pretty big amount of damage of their overall damage. So this was like very strong. It's just that it wasn't a great play style, and it doesn't lean towards the direction that Blizzard wants to take Shadow. And that's a good segue to look at the new one, which I think lines up more with that. So the new Shadow Priest redesign, the 2-set bonus, increases the chance for Shadowy Insight to trigger by 25%, so that's already an additional thing that it didn't do before. When consuming Shadowy Insight, Mind Blast deals 30% increased damage and generates 4 additional insanity. So before it was 60% increased damage, and now it's 30% increased damage, so I guess they thought it was doing too much. Although they increased the chance that it triggers, whereas before they didn't have any increase to how often you got a Shadowy Insight proc. And then the 4-set bonus, Devouring Plague damage increased by 15%. So this is entirely different from what the 4-set was before. Devouring Plague damage increased by 15%. Every 4 casts of Devouring Plague increases the damage of shadowy apparitions conjured within the next 10 seconds by 80%. So, excuse me, this is definitely leaning more towards what the rest of the Shadow Priest changes have been kind of leaning towards so far, which is that they want like shadowy apparitions and spread cleave and psychic link to be like this big deal. They want Shadow to be more of a, or at least they're designing it like they want this. They want Shadow to be more of a like spread, put your dots on everything. It doesn't matter if they're really far away or really close, you're still going to do a lot of damage to them. And honestly, it's a lot similar to how Shadow used to be in like BFA and before, where in Legion especially, where your dots were like a pretty big deal, and your focus was trying to get your dots on as many things as possible, and then generate as many of those shadowy apparitions as possible. Like if you didn't play in BFA, you should go back and watch one of my Tol Dagor keys, or somebody else who played Shadow, because in Tol Dagor, it was a great example of this. In Tol Dagor, on the beach pull, the very first pull of the dungeon, you would grab like 20 crocodiles or something, like just a huge pull, and you'd put all of your dots on them, and then you would just have hundreds and hundreds of shadowy apparitions just flowing out of your character. And it was super cool to see, and it did a ton of damage, and people really, really loved moments like that, and Blizzard moved away from that pretty hardcore going into Shadowlands. Although there were still times where you could have like a lot of shadowy apparitions coming out in Shadowlands. It was just that they weren't nearly as, maybe not nearly as satisfying, I guess. Anyway, so they're moving back towards that, which I think is really cool. Devouring Plague doing more damage is good. I like Devouring Plague being our spender. I think it's interesting that we used to have no AoE spender back in Shadowlands. Not in Shadowlands, back in BFA. It used to be that, way back before Shadowlands, it would just be that you get into Void Form, you try to hold Void Form as long as possible, and then you drop out of Void Form, and that was like the whole rotation. You're just trying to get as much Void Form uptime as possible. And then in Shadowlands, they swapped it so that you were way more cooldown oriented, so you'd have big bursts during your cooldown windows. And honestly, in Shadowlands, it got really crazy, because if you played like Night Fae Shadow Priest, there were some really weird overlaps, and it was hard to time your cooldowns and things. But then moving into Dragonflight, they made the cooldown tracking and like timing and synchronization thing for Shadow Priest way, way, way easier, where you only have a 1 minute or a 2 minute cooldown instead of having like Fae Guardians, which would give you like 30 seconds off of your cooldown sometimes, and depending on how much uptime you have of it, you have to change how many casts of Void Form you get in a fight, things like that. Anyway, all of this is to say, Devouring Plague is going to be our playstyle in 10.1, especially Mythic Plus, is going to be less about trying to deal like, because Mindseer's gone, right? So you're not going to be trying to like have everything on top of each other, doing spells that do damage to a bunch of things. That's going to come passively. You're going to put all your dots on everything, and then all of your single target spells, you're just going to do like your main single target rotation on whatever the priority target is. And then all of your single target spells, or at least very, very many of them, if not all of them, will be echoing their damage to everything else. So it's going to feel pretty similar to, I mean, it kind of puts the rotation into a pigeonhole where your entire rotation, regardless of the content, will be pretty much the same. It's pretty much just dot everything, do your single target rotation. So there's not a whole lot of variance there, but that has its pros and its cons, right? On the pro side, it means that if you can get the single target rotation down, then you can do a lot of good damage in like any situation, right? You don't have to be as flexible. But the downside is that you don't have to be as flexible, right? A lot of people like the challenge of, oh, how am I going to approach this situation differently than how I approach this other situation, right? And how am I going to change how I play? And there still will be a little bit of that, but yeah, basically your single target rotation is going to be echoing its damage to everything. So there's going to be a lot. I think it's going to raise the skill floor a lot and pull the skill ceiling down a little bit. So if you're really, really bad at the game, I think that wait, I got that backwards. I think it'll bring the skill floor down a lot, and then the skill ceiling down a little bit. So if you're really, really bad at the game, and Shadow Priest has just been way too hard for you, I think that this new rework is going to be beneficial for you. I think that it's easier. because like I said, you don't have to be as flexible, you don't have to know as much. As long as you can get this one rotation down, you'll be good in most content. And I think that it brought the skill ceiling down a little bit too, where to be the very, 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 very best, you don't have to be as flexible, you don't have to know all the ins and outs about all these tiny micro optimizations and things. Obviously, there still will be things like that, but I think that current Shadow in 10.0.7 is more complicated. 10.0.5 is more complicated than it will be in 10.1. Anyway, so I'm just rambling at this point. I think that these changes are pretty interesting. I like Devouring Plague a lot. I think it's a pretty fun spell to press. And I think that this every 4 casts thing is interesting. It's going to be like pretty cyclical, pretty rhythmic, where you're going to be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, boom, I'm doing all my damage, doing all my stuff. Okay, now I try again, 1, 2, 3, boom. You know, like you're gonna get in these cycles, which will be kind of fun. It'll be nice to play around this. But anyway, so that's the new changes. I'm interested to know what you guys think. Let me know down in the comments below if you think these are good changes or if they're bad changes. I know a lot of people were pretty excited about this Shadow Fiend and Mindbender thing. A lot of people like the Shadow Flame Prism playstyle. A lot of people like playing around these windows. So I know a lot of people were excited about that. So maybe you guys are sad that this is changing. But I also know there are people on the other side of the fence who hate that playstyle and really want to get back to the old school BFA, dot everything, do a million damage playstyle. So like I said, let me know what you guys think. If you liked the video, make sure you click the like button. If you really liked it, feel free to subscribe, maybe leave a comment, maybe share it with your friends. I do have a Discord server in the description. You can join there and come chat with us. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!